Hey there, nerds. Jimmy Palmquist here with two nerdy dads, and with me, as always, is Jason Applegate. Say hey, Jason.
Hey, everybody. How's it going?
So we are coming to an end of the summer. Some of us already have kids in school. Some of us are going back to school next week. So we
Yeah,
are ending our nerdy summer, which is sad. We had a lot of nerdy stuff going on this summer, Jason.
we did. Got a lot in, jam-packed. It flew by, but lots of quality time with the family. Lots of fun. Yes, it officially ends. Michigan, I think, is like the last state to go back to school. We start after Labor Day. Had a couple of teacher duty days that I had to put in. So my summer's kind of over, but then we get this nice sort of 4-day weekend and then start off. But I tell you what, I see your Ohio hat. Michigan's
Oh,
on.
I'm sorry. What was that? What was that,
I
Jason?
see your Ohio hat.
That
And
is right.
Michigan's
That's
on TV right
Ohio
now.
University.
That's right.
Yes.
Go Bobcats. So it reminded me, oh, it really is a Bobcats. That's awesome.
What do you
Way
think?
to
I was
go.
messing around? We got Bobcats.
That's awesome. Hey, it was black. That's part of it. It could have been the old Buckeyes, which you are a fan of,
I'm
so
not familiar with these Buckeyes you speak of. Oh wait,
shut up. Anyway, it would one of the things that drives me nuts, and if you don't know this already, I'm originally from Colorado, and so I've only lived in Michigan for like the last, almost 15 years now, but still, what drives me crazy about Michigan is August. It's as though like Michigan, the state of Michigan doesn't want the party to be over. You know that guy that'll be at the party and like he doesn't want it to end, so he'll just like do crazy shot and just like go nuts and just that's what the weather's like here. Like it's August, it's towards the end, like fall's kind of coming around. We've got football on TV and Michigan's like, no, the party's not over. Let's have 90-degree weather, super humid, and make it really sticky so that you think it's still summer. Hate it. The hottest days are always the first week of school. It's terrible. The hottest and most humid, because I know you like the heat has nothing to compare with Vegas, but we both know that a dry heat is much more tolerable than this nasty humid craziness that we have going on. But anyway, rant over. Sorry about that, everybody.
no problem, sir. I totally understand. I don't miss those humid days of Ohio. It is a dry heat. We went from 115 and now we're back down to about 98, 99. So it's cooled off. It's very nice.
Yeah, the few times I've been to Vegas, which have all been awesome. The one time I did go in the summer, I've experienced what you're talking about, and what was crazy was the time that I went, it was very windy, and when we went outside, it was as though you want to know what it's like to be in Vegas in the summer on a windy day. Anyone who doesn't live there, just get a hair dryer, turn it on high, and stick that thing right in front of your face, because that's basically what it feels like. It's just like blasting hair dryer right in your face. So there you go. You can have the experience right from home.
Exactly. So
Awesome.
what do we have on the docket today?
Well, I think the first thing that was something that you came across. Apparently, there's been some revelation as to what the plot for Civil War is going to kind of consist of, at least loosely. And I thought it was kind of cool because it ties in exactly with what we were talking about last week with regards to that we didn't think that it was going to follow the comic book storyline, specifically with regards to the Registration Act and the revealing of identities and so forth and so on. So it's kind of cool to see that, hey, we weren't too far off on that. But I thought it brought up some interesting issues as to what it will cover. And basically the split is going to be based on whether or not the Avengers, with the aftermath of the Ultron event, whether or not they should be allowed to act independently and just kind of do what they want to do and what they feel is right, or whether they should be part of the political system and therefore, kind of be under maybe the United Nations or something like that, especially now that S.H.I.E.L.D. is no more. Like, who do they answer to, basically? So that'll be interesting. One, it reminds me of what seems to be the plot of Batman versus Superman a little bit. Although I think significantly different, but it did make me think of that. And two, I think it's really intriguing and a really interesting, even social commentary where you could see the Avengers as sort of stand in for the United States of America in ways in which we have sort of sometimes just said, well, we're going to do what we think is right, forget the rest of you. And some people have been behind that and said this was the morally correct thing to do, and this is what America's about, and so forth. And others have said, hey, no, what are we, we're not supposed to be just do whatever we want to do. We've got to answer to the other countries and go about it the right way, or what have you. So what are your thoughts, though, on it? My first question is, who do you think's on which side? Do you think that, because in the comics, Iron Man's on the pro-government regulation side and Captain America's not, which sort of, I remember when the comic came out, surprised me. I would have guessed it was the other way around. What do you think it's going to be, and what do you think of the idea?
Well, I think to start with the idea, I think that makes sense because I believe, now remember, I'm an old man, but I believe it was the first Avengers where they're near the end and Nick Fury is discussing with like Powers Booth and the panel that was up there, mm-hmm. and they were asking, well, what happens if there's another event, or like who's in charge? And they're like, and Nick Fury was something along the lines of, well, they do their own thing. They're we don't have any control over them. And I think that kind of leads to what we're going to see here, like you just said. As far as who is on what side, that's a tough call because you would think I would have to go with Captain America is going to be on the side that doesn't want oversight, but not in the way that he doesn't want oversight because he wants the freedom to do whatever he wants. But I think he will have his moral center, and that's what should be done, not like you said, the UN overseeing and, well, we can't go in because that's not our deal. We can't stop so-and-so from doing that because we feel it's wrong, but they don't. And I think Captain America will be like, no, wrong is wrong. That's what we have to do. And I think Tony Stark, Iron Man, will be on the side of, whoa, we can't just go busting down borders. We have to follow the law, follow what other people want, what other governments need and want. We can't just go do that. Now, that's a pure guess. That's from the gut. I'm not entirely sure. But I feel Captain America will want to do what's right versus necessarily what the law says. And I think that's where that's coming from. And it's not necessarily that Tony Stark wants to follow rules, because we all know he doesn't care about rules.
Right.
But yeah, that's kind of where I feel. What do you think?
Yeah, I think it could go one of two ways. And I think you are right. I think it is going to be Captain America is going to be the one who is bucking the rules, who's about doing what he feels is morally the right thing to do. And what I think is that it's going to be very much a, the old, it was from when we were kids in the 80s, the old X-Men versus Avengers comic, where Magneto has reappeared and now he's good. Like, I don't remember, it was some crazy storyline, like he was like cloned or something, or I don't remember what the whole concept was, but the basic idea was that he was now a good guy. He was with the X-Men, but the Avengers were like, no, we want to, this guy's, an awful person. We want to, take him to prison and he's got to face his crimes. And the X-Men are like, no, he's one of us, blah, blah, blah. That's the Winter Soldier, where it's, that's what I'm wondering. And I'm taking that mostly from the teaser at the end of Ant-Man, where it's, the Winter Soldier is kind of trapped, and Captain America and Falcon are determining whether they should help him get out and so forth. And so it seems like he's putting his own personal relationship and how he feels about what's the right thing to do about his friend against what the company comes. But what'll be interesting is, won't Tony be sort of hypocritical if he's on the side of like, we should do what the government wants us to do? Because in Avengers Age of Ultron, you're exactly right. He was very much the Frankenstein character. He was like, who cares about rules and who cares about you know, what's morally right or what is against the law or not against the law. We need to solve the problem, and here's the way that we can solve it. So it'll be really interesting, and I think that complexity might be, you know, welcoming. So it's not just, you know, this versus this. So it'll be cool. I'm looking forward to it.
And that's one of the other things I think you and I talked about it, was that given the events of Captain America: Winter Soldier and the revelation of Hydra, Cap followed Shield and what it turned out to be Hydra for a long time, and he was following the rules, not necessarily doing what he felt was right, but following the rules according to Shield, a la Hydra. And I think he's really going to call that into question with everything he does. That no, I'm going to do what I feel is right with that moral center. A lot of it's going to be, you know, 1940s moral center, because that's where he was.
Mm-hmm.
But I think that's one of the reasons that also leads me more to believe that he's not going to really listen to governments or organizations. He's going to do what he feels is right.
Yeah, and that's what's appealing about Captain America too, is that I think that's why we like him as a character, and we're more forgiving of him being a Boy Scout than maybe say we are Superman. Although some people appreciate that about Superman too, and I know I've grown to appreciate that about Superman, is the idea that he represents at the core what we believe America should be, and you know, the golden era and all of that stuff of when, you know, harkening back to that age in which we were, you know, perceptually, of course we know that that's not the reality of history, but that we were a moral center, that we were a country that did things right, and we were the good guys. So it makes sense that it plays that way, and it is Captain America Civil War, not Avengers Civil War, which I think sometimes we forget because there's so many characters in it.
Yeah, exactly. And it's interesting. I just literally, as we were on the air, read an article that might help Marvel. It could hurt Marvel, but it looks like Kevin Feige is going to be in complete control of Marvel Cinema moving forward, as the think tank that existed of Alan Fine, Brian Michael Bendis, Dan Buckley, and Joe Quesada has essentially been dissolved. And it's funny, I say that out loud, and I think of Star Wars Episode 4, where they talk about the Senate. And like, been dissolved. Okay, now we can just, you know, deal with the individual. It's like, oh wow,
Yeah.
Maybe it is a bad thing. But so now,
he's the emperor.
Exactly, he might be. But they discussed it in that those four, and then Feige, the think tank, though, were the ones that may have led to Joss Whedon not being happy with Age of Ultron and some of the events that happened, and why Edgar Wright left Ant-Man, because some of the feedback they were getting, and no, you can't do that, no, you have to do this, and why almost every Marvel movie is formulaic. Although they are good, they are formulaic.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So that's been disbanded, gone, and now apparently Kevin Feige is in total control, as well as the money man back in New York. He's in charge of Marvel Comics, and he did have a say in movies, but now apparently Disney said, nope, you don't have anything to do with that anymore. Ike Perlmutter, I think his name is. I apologize, Mr. Perlmutter, if I'm saying it wrong. I'm sure you're right. He's like Marvel CEO. He was the money man, and I guess he and Kevin would constantly get in fights over movie budgets. And obviously that's a huge thing, because the money man, the penny pinchers, want to keep the budget down. But you're talking about huge cinematic films. Budget has to be high because they need to do a ton of stuff. And it's not like you're spending the money first, hoping to get a return. And investors don't like that. They don't want to spend money. They just want the big return. And when you put out, you know, I can't remember, $100 million or what have you for Avengers, you don't know that $1 billion is coming in. So you don't want to spend that much. So I guess it was a constant fight between him and Kevin. And this is an interesting note. In this article, it said Mr. Perlmutter may have been the reason why there were 0 Black Widow toys. Apparently, he didn't think they would sell. So he did not think, girl toys don't sell, so we're not selling them.
Wow. Well, it sounds to me, at least from that particular, you know, article and information, that he's pretty short-sighted, which shocker, a money man who has no vision and is only concerned about the bottom line of things and not the potential. Gosh, that I can't think of any time in which that's the case. So, but Disney knows what they're doing with regards to vision. I mean, as much as we talk about Disney as like, oh, the evil corporation and they own everything and stuff like that, I really think that they're good for, you know, for Marvel and for Star Wars. And I think one thing that they seem to do well is let the creativity happen. I'm always for less, you know, hands in the pie or whatever metaphor you want to use, where there's one captain that sails the ship and decides, you know, where are we going with this, instead of multiple people, especially if they are bickering about things.
Yeah, bureaucracy, I hate to say it, doesn't work all that well when you're in the creative side of things.
Mm-hmm.
You really have one creative mind and you kind of have to follow that. And then, I mean, you can translate that down, and especially on the producing side where you allow those things to happen with geniuses like Joss Whedon, Jon Favreau, Edgar Wright, although it's not like Ant-Man was screwed up because Edgar Wright didn't do it. But maybe this will allow them to take more risks, and we'll see characters do things like Daredevil. To me, was a great departure from anything we've seen with Marvel so far, but it wasn't a movie. It was on the TV side of things. I'd like to see a little more risk, but that's hard for me to say because I've really liked every single Marvel movie that came out except for Iron Man 2, and it wasn't the worst thing I've ever seen. It just wasn't as good as the first one. So I think it's good news, bad news. We'll see how it pans out.
Yeah, I don't know. It'll be interesting to see. So I mean, it's nice it's just nice. I mean, think back of when we were kids. There weren't any Marvel movies, you know? All we had was...
Maybe you have forgotten Captain America.
Okay, all right. There weren't any Marvel movies released to theaters. I should have qualified that statement. But you know, it's just sort of a golden age right now for Marvel anything or comic book anything, whether it's you know, the merchandise or movies and the rest. I think it's pretty cool time to be a nerd. That's for sure.
Oh, big time. Big time.
Speaking of being a nerd and cool things that are going on, apparently Force Friday is something that's trending. And I guess is this a marketing thing that they're doing where they're releasing a bunch of merchandise for Star Wars on Friday, tomorrow? Is that what's going on?
Yes, we are recording on Thursday, so nobody gets confused. And then obviously tomorrow's Friday. It honestly makes me, I don't want to say mad, but it's like almost like when May 4th first happened. It's like, this is stupid. What the heck? Who cares? Tomorrow, Friday, as far as I know, September 4th means nothing special. So I don't understand where this came. It seems like it came out of the blue. They're just releasing the new series of toys, which are for the new film. And if you were around in, I don't know, 1999 and maybe had a couple Phantom Menace toys, you realize this means nothing. Yeah, there's cool toys coming out. You'll get it. Don't worry. If you would like Phantom Menace toys, I have a ton. They're not worth anything. All right? Don't worry about it. They'll be there. Yeah, so I don't know the big deal other than fanatics wanting to get their toys ahead of anybody else, and I don't know. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe they're all limited edition. Maybe I have no clue what's going on. But to me, it's the same old. It's Disney, which they have every right to do, releasing a whole bunch of merchandise so they can make their money back.
Well, and I'm sure it's someone, you know, who is like, hey, this is a good shopping weekend. Let's release it. Because if you don't release it now, you do it closer to Christmas is the other time when you release something, because you want that, you know, pre-Black Friday kind of sales where people are buying a bunch of stuff. You know, you'll notice a lot of new toys will come out, but then the movie comes out on Christmas, so perhaps that's too tight of a window and they want the merchandise out there for a longer stretch of time. And I'm sure they'll release it in waves like they did with everything else. You know, Star Wars, going back to, I mean, you say Disney, but even back to, you know, Lucas was doing this same thing. I mean, he was a marketing genius, really.
Sure. He made one mistake. That was the first movie. They didn't have enough merchandise.
Right, exactly. But I mean, how could he? I mean, he wasn't making tons of money off of it yet, and a lot of people thought it was going to bomb and was going to be awful. I read an article that was talking about how his friends, his fellow director friends that went to, I think did he go to USC or UCLA? I think it was USC, right?
USC.
Yeah. Saw parts of his film or sat down, maybe saw a whole viewing of all of it, and all of them except for Spielberg told him it was crap and it wasn't going to do nobody would watch it, and no one would like it. But Spielberg was behind him on it. And it's so funny to think about that possibility. But to get back to it, the one thing that I did see that was cool was that new R2 droid with the ball, and apparently they have this, and of course there's no price on it, so that probably means I can't afford it. But in the ad, it shows the ball like rolling around, and there's app on your phone that you use to control it, and so you can use your phone, and the balance aspect of it drives it around, and you can send messages to other people's devices that are in the style of the Obi-Wan, you're my only hope kind of video type of thing. It looked really, really fun, like a really cool sharper image type of toy, but way cooler than the sharper image stuff that probably broke like in 4 months after you were done with the robot dog back in 19.
Totally agree, and I also agree with you, Jason, as we have both learned because we're old enough. If you have to ask the price, that means you can't. Probably
so, but it did look very cool.
I saw some video of it, and it moved really cool. They used the magnetic thing, whatever. Science. Yeah. I don't understand. I was a history major. I can tell you what happened in the past, but I can't tell you how this thing works. Sorry. But it looked awesome.
It did. It looked very cool. So, that kind of thing is exciting. And I'm a big action figures guy. I collect action figures. Mostly I collect the comic book stuff because that's my thing. But I collected the Star Wars stuff when that came out. Phantom Menace, I bought the entire first wave. So, if Jimmy's supply runs out and you're looking for Phantom Menace toys, just let me know. I can put them up on eBay for you, and they'll sell for like 12 cents each or something like that. But
I have a want to start swearing so that none of our family will watch this episode because I'm about to reveal where my Star Wars toys went. They became birthday presents for my nieces and nephews.
Oh,
their package, and they're still cool. There's nothing wrong with them. But as a 30-year-old man, I don't need to have these stored anywhere anymore. I'm not going to play with them. So yes, I would gift them. Year after year, birthday after Christmas after birthday after Christmas.
Yes, my brother, who's has always been more of a Star Wars fan than I have, and I think I've mentioned him before. He has like a life-size Yoda, and all kinds of really cool stuff.
What's his name again? I can't remember.
I don't remember either. Actually, I forget. I was hit over the head this morning.
Your amazing brother,
James. His name is James. A great.
Cool kid.
Anglo-Saxon name.
Good guy.
He's a good guy. He's a very good guy. But that's what he did with his Star Wars toys, was gave them to my son for the longest time. Now, his were not the episode 1 stuff. He had before that, when they re-released the original 3 movies to the theaters, which was really cool, by the way, to be able to see those in the theaters again like that. Even though you and I both agree that the remastered stuff was obnoxious and there were lots of things that Lucas did, like the Jabba the Hutt scene that, we didn't like. But it was cool to see them on the big screen again. Well, when those toys were re-released, they were pretty cool, especially after the first wave when they were all steroided up, and you had the Princess Leia who looked like she was on the German swim team. But the other... later on in the other waves, they were pretty cool. So my son would keep getting those action figures too, and I think that's great. Why not, give those to somebody who's gonna, enjoy them, open them up, play with them. That's what they're for.
I completely agree. I do want to have one more point, and I think you'll like this from your English background.
Awesome.
I would have liked to have been in the marketing meeting where they're sitting going, what day of the week can we release this? What alliteration can we make? Force Awakens Friday. No, F-A-F is not an alliteration. Force Friday. hey, you know what? Star Wars begins with an S. Star Wars Saturday. Oh, there's a Wars in there. That's not alliteration either. Okay, I guess we'll go with Force Friday because that makes no sense, but it's an alliteration.
Yeah, that must be it.
Drives me
Must
nuts.
be it. Plus, you can hashtag it just FF if you want to, maybe too. You know, it's all about making it as short as possible. Follow Friday to play off of that.
I think you're a genius because it is. Flashback Friday, Follow Friday. They'll get everybody who's searching for that. Jason, you're a genius.
Yeah. Hey, why aren't I getting the big bucks? That's the thing. It baffles me.
I thought you were because I'm not.
No, I am not. I can't afford that R2 droid thing, man. There's, I'm not making the big bucks. Other news that we had was surrounding Idris Elba, and there were rumors that he was going to be the next James Bond, and then I guess the latest thing, I'm not sure who it was. Was this the director of the next Bond movie, or the current one that's coming out that still has what's his face in it? That basically said he thought he was too street to play the part or something, wasn't suave enough.
First, and I'm not trying to be that guy, it's Idris. There's a D in there, it's not Iris.
Oh, thank you.
And it was who was it? It was the guy who's currently writing the novels, I believe.
Oh, okay.
I think it's Anthony Horowitz who said
that's it. That's the name, yep.
And it was like, dude, you're not Ian Fleming, who has passed away, if you don't know. So shut up. You're writing the books, dude. And if you've ever read a Bond book versus the movie, they're different. They are. Yes, they're based on that. I can't remember. Oh, I think it was Living Daylights or something along those lines, which was like the last film based on one of the books. And then after that, they were pretty much all original. And then coming back to Casino Royale, they took the name, and I've never read the book, so I don't know how much they took from the book. But for the most part, the books have kind of been separate from the movies for a while now. So for this guy to pipe in, it's like, dude, shut up. What are you talking about?
So even the source is not worthy, maybe, of even making this a thing. But, of course, it is going to be a thing because when you said it's Idris, is that how you say his name? Because I've only seen it in print. I've never actually heard anybody say it. When it was first announced that or rumored that he was going to be the next Bond, there was, surprise, surprise, everybody, there's this camp who thinks that's great. We finally have a black Bond. That's fantastic. And then this camp over here was like, that doesn't work. And you're trying to force something in that's not, and blah, blah, blah. And it's like, it's just like when, Falcon became Captain America. It's just like, oh gosh, I can't think of another equivalent example, but it shouldn't be a deal that he's,
I mean, I didn't see Fantastic Four, but there's a huge deal when Michael B. Jordan was playing Human Torch.
Yes, that's another perfect example. And it's like, why does this have to be a deal if, race isn't an issue with the character? So for example, if you have a character who's, say, rooted in history, like you're doing Braveheart, well, yeah, you can't cast William Wallace with a black actor. That that doesn't fit because it's not historically accurate, and you're showing a historical film, like it's based in history, so you have to sort of do it a certain way. But if you're talking about this is a fictional character and it's set in modern times, like what you're talking about, that they've strayed from the original books. It's not 1952. So why can't this actor who happens to be black play this character? Why not? It shouldn't be an issue.
Well, that's kind of the funny part is when Daniel Craig was cast, people were really upset because of the blonde hair.
Exactly.
And it's like, oh my God, I mean, that is even more ridiculous than this issue. But It really shows you how like diehard James Bond fans are. I mean, heaven forbid, how hilarious would it be if an English actor, or I mean an American actor, played James Bond. Yet we had no problem when a British actor played Batman, and Batman is clearly American. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about it.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't understand why there's all this, oh no, it's got to be, well, Scottish for a large part, thanks to Sean Connery, but it's got to be English, got to have black hair, and got to look this certain way. And it's like, what? Why?
I mean, I can understand that you want a James Bond who's suave. And a lot of people didn't like Daniel Craig because he was, a little more rough, and he was a little more, of a brutal Bond. I liked it. I thought it was a nice change of pace because I was kind of tired of the slick, almost like pretty boy James Bond, and kind of I like the Sean Connery Bond. And if you look back at say Dr. No, the very first one, which really plays more like a detective movie than a spy movie like we think of Bond now, he was just sort of like rough around the edges. He was kind of an everyman, and it isn't until later in subsequent films that he becomes, they develop him as a little more sophisticated and so forth. And why can't anyone pull that off, regardless of hair color or skin color? So I thought it was awfully silly that people were having an issue with this. I kind of understand the British thing, and to get to your comment about why can British actors play American characters and vice versa. As an actor and a director myself, it's because they're classically trained, and most American actors, unfortunately, are not. And so most American actors can't do British accents well. And take Kevin Costner and Robin Hood as a really prime example of that. Whereas like, oh my gosh, look, The Walking Dead, half those actors are from the United Kingdom or New Zealand or Australia or something, and you can't tell because they are so good at their craft.
Rick Grimes has a good Southern accent. He does not.
What's that?
All the memes are.
He doesn't.
Coral, exactly.
Okay, all right.
I get it. I don't mind, and I am joking. I totally agree with you that I think they can pull off accents way better. But have you seen Brad Pitt in The Devil's Own? Amazing. Really?
Well, and he was awesome in. That's a good point. And there are some American actors that are trained and have they know what they're doing. Dustin Hoffman's another great example of somebody who's like he knows his craft. Malkovich is another example. But you're right. Pitt was also in not Lock, Stock, and Two Smoking Barrels, but the sequel to that.
He's a pikey. Yes,
he was fantastic in that. Yeah, he was great in that. So it can be done, but you're right. It's I think this is another example of overblowing it. But hey, we can't give the Brits too much trouble because look at our Batman issues. I mean, when Michael Keaton was announced as Batman, everybody was like, that's terrible. What an awful idea that he doesn't have the jawline and blah, blah, blah. And then he was fantastic. And Heath Ledger is Joker. Same thing. What? The guy from Brokeback Mountain is going to be the Joker? So we do the same kind of thing. Let's see what happens. It all comes down to good writing, good acting, good directing, and it'll be fine.
And I just looked it up and double-checked, and I couldn't use audio, so I had to read it. I believe we were both wrong, and I think it's Idris.
Idris Elba. Okay.
Elba. And he's a phenomenal actor, so it really shouldn't matter what skin color is. One of my favorite, and we talked about it. I totally forgot about this one. Peter Dinklage in Days of Future Past. There is no mention of any little person anywhere in the comic books. And the fact that he played that, and you never ever thought, oh, my God, there's Peter Dinklage, the little guy. It's like, no, he played Trask perfect. Loved it.
Yeah, good point. So, speaking of characters that are of color, another black character has just been cast in the Luke Cage series, and I'm excited about it. I saw it blown up on Twitter and was psyched. I have heard of the character Misty Knight. who is a longtime character associated with Luke Cage. She was on the Defenders even, but I had to look her up because I didn't know tons. I just sort of knew sort of who she was. But it was getting a lot of positive feedback that they have cast this character, and I think it's because there are so few, Black characters that are in comics and in films and now in television shows. So I know it was pretty cool. People were excited about it. I looked up the actress who was playing her, and now I've misplaced the name, but she hadn't been in much. She was in. The only thing I saw that I recognized was she was in an episode of Ray Donovan. Is that the name of that Showtime series with Liv Shriver, I think is his name. I'm butchering names today.
I think it's Simone Missick.
That's it. Yeah, Simone. She looks. She looks like she would do. I saw one clip from the Donovan series, and she looks like she's got the chops to do it. She certainly looks the part. And I don't know enough about the character to know what needs to be accomplished, with it, except for that. What I do know is she's obviously a strong Black character and a strong Black woman.
Yeah.
Any thoughts?
I pretty much only know of her character from Civil War, and she was fought for Captain's side, which is cool. Very underground, actually, no, she was kind of in the middle, leaning towards Captain. She never took sides. And I remember I think she was with Iron Man, or she took money from Iron Man to find other heroes who were breaking the law, but then she basically gave them a heads up that they were going after him, and then she's basically playing both sides, but not in a nefarious way, just a way to help Captain's side, if I remember correctly. And then the other one was Shadowland series from Daredevil. She was in Heroes for Hire, I think.
Mm-hmm.
She kind of took over for that.
Yeah.
Was it Jessica Jones? It might have been.
Might have been, yeah.
Yeah, I can't remember. It was a while ago, but it was pretty cool. She's a badass, and it's awesome. It's awesome to see her go up against basically people who oppose her, because she gets in their face and takes them out. And if I'm not, I think this was her character in Shadowland. She had some kind of special arm or something.
She's got a bionic arm.
Okay.
So from that, I guess she has like impeccable aim with that arm when it comes to firearms. She has super strength. I think, relative to like Luke Cage probably. So we're not talking like Hulk size strength, but pretty, superhuman strength. And she's got, I guess she can fire pulses. I had seen on her character description. And she's technopathic, so she can like figure out technology or like kind of hack things like super easy, like talk to computers and that kind of stuff. Is another one of her powers. She just, like you were saying, she looks like a badass, and I am really digging these street level Marvel characters. I think, like you said, the Daredevil was a nice change from the Marvel movies. And I think she fits the mold, and so does Luke Cage and the rest that are going to be coming out. And I think that it's going to make for some good storytelling and a real nice opportunity to have another strong female character being portrayed. And I think Marvel is making a conscious effort to do that.
Well, it's cool too, because they have Alfre Woodard's going to be in it, and she is one of my favorite actresses of all time. And I don't know much about her character, Minetta, but dude, she's talking about a strong female as an actress. I can't wait to see how all this is going to come together. I love what they're doing with the Netflix series. They're awesome.
What has she been in? Because I'm not as familiar with her as you are.
Alfre Woodard?
Yeah.
Man, she was in 12 Years a Slave. She was in Grey's Anatomy. I'm looking it up right now because I'm like, I've seen her in tons of stuff. I just can't think of anything. Desperate Housewives, Radio. She was Radio's mom. No, she was Principal Daniels in that. In Radio. K-Pax, Love and Basketball, Mumford.
all these movies I haven't seen. 12 Years a Slave, I did see that.
Star
So
Trek.
so I would recognize her from that.
Yeah, what am I thinking she was in? Oh, have you ever seen Heart and Souls
No.
with Robert Downey Jr.?
No.
Oh, it's such a good movie. It's so goofy. He essentially, as a baby, all these people are killed in a car crash or a bus accident, and they're tied to this baby, and they don't understand why. They just watch him grow up, and they're always there, and they're giving him advice, and he basically can see them. He doesn't understand that they're not real. They're basically just spirits. And I can't remember. He reaches in his early 30s or late 20s or whatever, and they finally realize they're supposed to utilize him in order to make restitution with everything that happened on Earth, so that they can say goodbye to loved ones and all that stuff. And Alfred Werner is one of the women who passed away on the bus, but Robert Downey Jr. is the guy that they all have to go through. It's got Charles Grodin. I don't know why I'm going off of this movie, but it's just really good. Kara Sedgwick, Tom Sizemore, David Paymer, Elizabeth Shue. It's such a
Elizabeth Shue.
Check it out. But yeah,
I'll have to Netflix that bad boy.
Oh, here you go. She is in Scrooged. She's Bill Murray's secretary.
Okay.
Yeah,
all right, that I've seen. So yeah, definitely excited about that whole series, and really all three of the series that are coming out on Netflix they're all interconnected too. So they're gonna do crossover Arrow style, like that they're doing with that series. Speaking of which, did you see or did you not see the costume of the Diggle character? And again, you and I, we've seen a little bit of Arrow, but we don't keep up with it because it's not exactly our demographic. But I thought it looked really, really, really goofy. And what's that? You haven't seen it?
No.
It looks like a really bad football helmet that he has on. Slash, maybe Magneto washed his helmet in the laundry and it dried and shrunk. I know it's metal, so it doesn't make any sense.
I think I'm looking at this, and if you hadn't said that, I would have been like, wow, somebody just messed up John Diggle. This looks stupid. What a fake meme.
Yeah, it looks really bad.
I wonder if NFL did get sponsorship on this or something.
You know what it does look like, though, is it looks like one of those boxing helmets that they wear, in the sparring rings or something like that. I wonder if that was the concept, but it looks bad.
Yeah, it does.
It looks bad, and I don't understand why they feel like they have to put everybody into costume, because it's not like Arrow's costume has been that green. He doesn't have the old Robin Hood hat or even the the little beard that comes down. So why what are we doing here? Just let him be in his suit or put on his the old Archer black, the black, the dark black sweater, just go with that. He doesn't have to be in a costume that hides his identity. I don't get it.
You know what, though? They've messed up some pretty big with some of the costumes. I've never had a problem with Arrow, but what was it, season 2 with the guy who was running for councilman? I can't remember what the bad guy character was, but that thing he put on his face, that mask thing, and it was like, oh my God, it looks awful. Awful. Even John Barrowman's character in a costume in season 1. I'm like, really? That's
yeah. It's it reminds you that it's being produced on the CW. Whereas otherwise, it's been pretty good, and we've mostly had nice things to say about that series in the limited amount that we've watched it. So anyway, probably the biggest news that we've had since last week, and I'll let you speak to it because it was probably a bigger deal for you, only because it's more your genre of nerdiness, was the passing of Wes Craven. So why don't you say a few words of what you think he was to the industry and what some of his favorite works were that you really appreciated, and we'll go from there.
Wes Craven last Saturday, to me, very unexpectedly passed away. I guess he passed away from brain cancer. He was revolutionary. That's the best way to put it. And he was revolutionary several times over. A lot of horror film guys just kind of make their mark and then they're gone. There's some exceptions. John Carpenter is an exception. But others, they kind of make their film, and if they're lucky, it becomes a franchise, and they really don't do anything else worthwhile. Wes Craven, he, he's a boy from Cleveland, which always gets me. It's just amazing that he's from Cleveland. He was raised very strict by the Bible. I don't remember which specific branch of Christianity, but very strict with his dad and his mom. And he went to college, was a professor in college, realized that wasn't really what he was meant to do. He worked on pornographic films, cutting them together, and just loved film and loved doing that. And his first film was produced by Sean S. Cunningham, which you might know from Friday the 13th fame, was Last House on the Left. And it was brutal, raw, just 70s in your face. It's uncomfortable to watch.
Yes.
And it's essentially a revenge flick. It's not really a horror flick. It's a revenge flick. And it really plays off of sort of these urban myths you think of, especially back then, with letting your kids go into the city, fear of drugs, running into strangers, and every single thing you're afraid would happen happens. And then it just so happens that the bad guys run into the parents find out, and they take care of business. And it's not, oh, we're just going to shoot them in the head. No, they take care of business. And it's messed up, and it really makes you feel the film. And a lot of films don't do that. You either feel excited or whatever, but this one makes you feel that raw heartache, brutal violence that happens to these two girls. And it's pretty awful, but it's an amazing look at cinematic experience. He followed that up with The Hills Have Eyes, which is more into the horror realm, but again, playing on those fears of isolation, running into strangers. Specifically, these are mutants in the desert who experienced nuclear fallout from all the testing, and they really brutalized this family. And he starts with some of his tropes, like the blonde woman who's always the innocent. If you sex or drugs or anything along those lines, you're going to be killed. And those carried along with a lot of his films. He did several films in between there, but the big one that at least people of my generation know and scared the crap out of us is A Nightmare on Elm Street with Freddy Krueger. It's amazing how, if you watch a lot of horror films, and one of my favorite series is Friday the 13th, Jason wasn't Jason from the beginning. He evolved into the guy with a hockey mask over, several films. Freddy Krueger, right out of the gate, he was Freddy Krueger, and he scared the crap out of you. And he didn't do anything. Freddy Krueger didn't kill. His dreams and what you imagined in your dreams, he would use that against you, and that's what got you. And the fact that Wes Craven took that character from somebody who he saw outside of his window living in Cleveland, he just saw him in the street light. That was the first inkling. He took it from a newspaper article with refugees from Khmer Rouge who were not sleeping. And eventually they fell asleep and did not wake up. And they had said, we can't fall asleep because all the horror we have seen, all the nightmares we have when we fall asleep, we can't. And it was like 3 or 4 cases, and they died. And he was fascinated with that concept, that they refused to sleep, and that's what they died from. And then Freddy Krueger, the name, Krueger, comes from if I remember this correctly, a bully he had in his own schooling days. I think it was Frederick Krug, I think it was. Or it might have been, no, I'm sorry. Krug was the character in Last House on the Left, which he also based it on. It was Frederick Krueger was a bully to him. And he named his own monster in the movie after that bully. And it came together perfect. Such a brilliant film. He lost control of the series. New Line Cinema owned it. He lost control of it, meaning he did not envision it to be a franchise. They made it a franchise. He was given credit back with the third one, meaning he got restitution for some of the money that came in, because it was not meant to be a huge film, but it really is known as the studio that Freddy built, because they were bankrupt. They make this film, and now New Line is still around, and they're still making movies, and it's all because of Wes Craven and Freddy Krueger. So he makes the third one. I'm sorry, he didn't make the third one. He helped with the story. Frank Darabont was actually a writer on it, which is very cool. But he really didn't come back around till A New Nightmare, which is this really high concept. Freddy Krueger, the character, comes into the real world. So we see Robert Englund as Robert Englund. That's the actor that played Freddy. We see Heather Langenkamp as Heather Langenkamp, who was the girl who played Nancy, as their real selves. And Freddy is attacking them as real people, which is pretty high concept. And I'm not sure it came off completely, but what it did lead to was a fascinating revitalization of Wes Craven in the Scream franchise. I mean, here's a guy who makes Freddy Krueger, could totally, I'm done, whatever, makes another huge hit in the horror film series with Scream. I haven't seen the MTV series, so I don't know, but he made 3 pretty good follow-ups. He did direct them all, which is pretty cool. He also went outside of the horror genre, and I know he constantly wanted to, wasn't always given that opportunity because that's what he was known for. And then he finishes up his career, in my opinion, with 2 Cursed, which is just a fun movie with Jesse Eisenberg and, oh man, Wednesday from the Addams Family. I can't remember her name. Christina Ricci. Just a fun flick. And then Red Eye. A lot of people forget about that movie, but Cillian Murphy and I can't remember the girl in that one. But that was another one. It was just very in a plane, psychological thriller, passenger threatening another passenger, and it's all stuck in a plane. You're like, how did he pull this off? So tight, so great. Other classics. I love Shocker. I love The People Under the Stairs. He did Swamp Thing, which, let's be honest, it's not
the classic
DC, but it's a great movie. I mean, this is and he made a good movie. I mean, it was just really, really good.
It is a cult classic, yeah, that's for sure.
It really is, and it's so sad because to me, the world really lost an icon. As we posted on Nerdlocker, my nightmares will be a lot less scary because he's not around. And I was fortunate enough to meet him. He was such a nice guy, very debonair, well-spoken, gracious. We went to a dinner in Cleveland. He was hosting for the Cleveland Film Institute, and he was going around meeting people, shaking hands. And he came to our table, and we got a picture, got an autograph. And Allison, my wife, takes out a Little Mermaid notepad and asks him to sign it. And it wasn't to be weird or anything. It's just what she had. So he's like, oh, that's cute. Signs his name and then draws little bubbles by Ariel. And he's like, well, we got to make sure she's breathing, right? We don't want anything bad to Ariel. And I'm just in that moment freaked out because here's a man who looks debonair, is being very gracious, is caring about Ariel, yet he has no problem making a character with knives for fingers just killing people. I'm like, this juxtaposition that's going on in my head is going to fry my brain. But that's how he was. He was so nice, such a great man, great stories. And I'm very, 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 very sad that we'll never get to see another film of his, a new film of his.
Well, and you're much more of a horror film buff than I am, especially, the newer ones. Like I like horror films, from the 1930s on. I love the genre, but I'm not as much of a connoisseur as you are. But so correct me if I'm wrong, but for me it seemed like what he did with the Nightmare on Elm Street movies was he took the violence and like blew it up, like just made it like uber violent in a way that was so fantastical that it was both shocking and also fascinating, to watch. I would imagine some of the stuff special effects wise that he did with those films was pretty groundbreaking too. So I don't know. Can you speak to that? Am I way off base there, or
no, not at all? Before that film came out, most of the mainstream horror films were on par with like Halloween and Friday the 13th, where you would have a single killer who would be hunting like teenage kids or what have you, and they would invariably show a perspective of the killer, so that you as an audience would at some point be experiencing what the killer's experiencing. Wes Craven purposely made sure there was zero point of view visions or scenes with Freddy Krueger. You were always looking at Freddy. You were never looking at the kids from Freddy's perspective. That way, as an audience, we are always the victim, always on the defensive, which is pretty brilliant. And you really don't think about it. It's just a psychological thing that happens in filmmaking. And then to your point, he played on something that we all experience, nightmares and dreams. We don't all go camping. We don't all have Haddonfield where Halloween and Michael Myers is just going around trying to catch his sister and oops, got in the way, going to kill you. We also don't have Hellraiser where we find a little box and we make it in shapes and then Pinhead comes out. We don't have Texas Chainsaw Massacre where Leatherface comes after you in the middle of nowhere because you got lost. No, but we all have nightmares and we all have dreams. And that's access for Freddy to get to us. And that was genius. And that's one of the things that he wanted to make sure that didn't happen, which happened in the second one. Freddy came into the real world, and he was totally against that. He didn't think that was what Freddy could do. So that was one of the reasons why he didn't come back and direct the sequel. If you go back and watch, Freddy doesn't come back into the real world. If he does, it's a dream. And it's always a dream if he's there. And that's pretty ingenious. The killer's never there. He's not. And it's funny because a lot of the history of Freddy Krueger was not in the first one. You have the story, and it's been a while, but I believe you still have the story where Nancy's mom is recounting that, yes, Freddy was a child murderer, not a molester. They wanted to make sure they didn't go that fine line. With the remake, they made it clear he was a child killer and molester. And when you look back at it, it's like, oh my God, that's despicable. What? Ew. For some reason, when it's just child killer, it's okay. And the way that Robert Englund played it, it was okay. I don't know if it was the humor he pulled. I don't know, but it worked a lot better than when Jackie Earle Haley played it. But you have these stories and that describing that he killed kids on Elm Street and that the parents took revenge, and now he's going after the kids of those parents. And that story by itself would be cool. But then you add into the dreams and the nightmares and, like you said, the special effects, and they were hokey. They were so realistically hokey. And I don't know if people remember, but he's got the scene where he has his arms extended going down the alleyway and he's scraping his nails on the metal wall. That was fishing rods on extended, just pulled arms. It wasn't anything special, but the way they shot it dark so you couldn't see it. And the nails just making the sound. And from what I understand, it was a steak knife on the bottom of a metal chair was that sound, which is just still, you're like, oh my God, that's disgusting, awful. The opening shot of that film is actually not Robert Englund as Freddy Krueger. The first guy as Freddy Krueger is the special effects guy who knew how to put the glove together with the knives. He knew how he did it, so he made it and literally put it together right there on camera. It's just fascinating story how a film made in 1983, released in 1984 on I want to say it was about $1 million budget, maybe $1.8 million, gets made and then makes 40, 50 million, which is a huge bunch back in those days. And they just, they knew how to do it. And I believe Wes Craven even worked with the Raimi brothers, Ted and Sam, on the first Evil Dead. So we had some of that insight on how they shot their film, which is, again, just genius how he shot, like Tina, who's one of the first girls to get killed, and he shot her on a revolving room. Like if you remember Lionel Richie's Dancing on the Ceiling, that's what they did. The room was going, and then Tina's rolling with the room, so it looks like Freddy's in control of her. Did the same thing with Johnny Depp, his first movie, by the way, when he gets sucked into the bed and the blood just genius filmmaking and brilliant.
And that's what I mean by how it was sort of groundbreaking. Was it was so fantastical, like that exaggerated violence, and maybe it's a little bit dated now, and you look back at them and it might sort of seem hokey, but when you watch it with the eye of someone who's watching it at the time, it was that fantastic element to it that made it scary because it was in the dream world, whereas everything before that was really just a harsher version of Psycho, you know, slasher movies. Because Psycho is really the first slasher movie where you have that there's a scene where you have the killer's perspective in the shower scene, which is the most famous scene in probably all of horror film. And you know, the music and everything can all be traced back to Psycho. And this was really something that took the idea of this sort of serial killer slasher film, but then turned it on its ear and combined it with the supernatural aspect, like you saw with, say, The Exorcist, you know, where you have that supernatural element playing into it as well. And you're accessing a whole nother, you know, element of fear and horror. You know, fear of the supernatural. And I think that's something that's pretty cool. To comment real quickly on the first film that you talked about, The Last House on the Left, I saw that in a horror film class. And am I wrong? And you may not know this, but if I remember right, when they kill some of the people, they used a chainsaw. And if I remember correctly, it was an electric, like you plugged it into the wall, like they had a big long extension cord and were killing them with that bad boy. And I was just like, for some reason, it sounds funny now, but it made it so much more horrific because it seemed to add to the effect that these are just mom and dad. Like these are just people. And they were you know, pushed. And this is what happened is, and as an audience, you sympathize with the parents, but at the same time are horrified by them. And I thought it was, like you said, it was such a unique emotional experience that I don't think any other movie really I can point to recreates that experience. And another little, this is the English major in me too, that's kind of neat to know about that movie is it's the concept is based upon an old Norse myth about a virgin who is you know, raped and killed, and then the father takes revenge on the killers, and where he spills their blood, there's an eternal spring that fountains out of it. And so it actually has, you know, roots in some pretty, you know, like you were talking about, myth in there, and in cultural relevance, and something that I think is a basic part of humanity, where we all sort of, you know, can relate to, you know, revenge and what, you know, how we feel. And you saw that in Freddy too, because the parents, when that story gets fleshed out, they take revenge upon Freddy Krueger for what he did to children. That killing of innocence is, I think, in any culture, is the most awful of crimes that you can ever commit, is to destroy innocence. And I think lots of horror films you know, hit on that, but some don't. The Nightmare on Elm Street don't, because that's the key, is that these people die because they're not innocent. They're out drinking, they're having sex, they're being naughty, and Jason's coming after them. You know, so I thought it was something that was kind of story-wise unique, starting way back with Last House on the Left.
It's funny you mentioned that about the Norse mythology, and I can't remember, or the story. I can't remember the film. It was like Strawberry Fields or something like that. It's an old Swedish film that basically they took that from.
Yeah,
So
it's a old black and white, right?
Yes, I can't remember what it's called though off the top of my head. Darn it! But yeah, it's interesting you say that. I didn't realize there was a story, like a literature behind it. I just knew it was.
Yeah, and maybe I'm off with calling it Norse. Like it's definitely medieval, though. You know, it's a medieval story, and
No,
it was that exact same idea. Yeah,
Norse works. That's my people, the Swedes.
that's true. That's true. Very cool. So, you know, we're sad to see Wes Craven go, but certainly an icon, and we can always look back at what he's done and still enjoy it, and realize, you know, what a trendsetter and a trailblazer he really was, and sounds like pretty cool dude too.
Yeah, he was super. Again, just the juxtaposition of being a super nice guy, very gracious, warm handshake, a smile, and just behind those eyes, you knew existed the creator of Freddy Krueger, of Ghostface, of Krug and Last House on the Left, all these evil things, but yet he's smiling with a nice handshake. Such a nice guy. Yeah, it was, yeah. Yep.
Very cool. Very cool. So, I think we've talked about all the news that's out there. The only other thing that we had mentioned was this last week was also Jack Kirby's birthday. So talking about icons like Wes Craven, you certainly can say the same thing about Jack Kirby and what he did for that industry. And I don't want to get into, going through his biography by any means, but we would be remiss if we didn't, sort of acknowledge that. Any recommendations at all, nerdy or family or otherwise, that we might be able to leave our audience with before we cut out today?
Well, I did a tribute to Wes Craven, and as I did that, it occurred to me that as MTV is doing this new series for Scream TV show, and the most recent film was Scream, that would be Wes Craven's. I think we have a generation that really doesn't know the original Nightmare on Elm Street. And I think they were sort of cheated by the remake. I've actually talked to a couple of younger kids in their early 20s, late 20s, who thought that was an amazing movie. And I apologize that you think that, because it was a piece of crap. You need to go back and watch the original A Nightmare on Elm Street. That would be my recommendation. And I should preface this. This is not a kid's movie. Do not take anywhere. In my opinion, do not take anyone under the age of 18. But I'm an old man. I'm a father. I would not have my kids watch that until later in life.
Yeah.
You and I probably watched it a lot younger, so there's that going. But yeah, watch A Nightmare on Elm Street, the original. If you want, watch the third one, because I also enjoy that. And then you can watch A New Nightmare, because it was also Wes Craven. But the first one, most definitely. That would be my recommendation.
And I think that's just a blanket recommendation for any remake of a horror film. Go back and watch the original, because I'm an old school guy too, but I mean, even stuff that was before my time, like Last House on the Left and Texas Chainsaw Massacre and some of that stuff, the originals are just, even though maybe the graphics aren't as good and they didn't do as much with, the technology aspect of it, the storytelling with the camera, and the way they used the camera and the way they told the stories is far superior, in my opinion. And some of what makes those films good is their lack of budget, is the casting of characters who, in my opinion, they look like normal people. The biggest thing that bothered me about Texas Chainsaw Massacre is it was basically, cover models that were being hunted by this guy now, instead of just people who looked like everyday teenagers. And now we want, like people that are on the cover of, FHM or something like that, running around in their bra and underwear, and adding, there's too much emphasis on, the connection between horror and sexuality. And I feel like you lose something with that. But maybe I'm just being old school, but I agree with you. Go back and watch the originals. And then if nothing else, if you like the remakes, it should give you a greater appreciation of the remake then.
For sure. And man, you're getting me juiced. We're going to have a all horror episode, because you're absolutely right. You have, in fact, it wasn't until, this is one of the reasons why Wes Craven jumped on the Scream franchise. He originally turned it down, was Drew Barrymore was signed to be in it. And at that time, named actresses really didn't go from conventional films to horror. You did have horror actresses like Jamie Lee Curtis go to conventional film, but for the most part, respectable actresses or actors did not cross over. That was taboo.
Right.
And here you have Drew Barrymore signing up to be, basically the first person killed in Scream. And Wes was just enthralled with that idea, so he did it. Nowadays, you see it all the time where, like you said, you have the beautiful people coming over and they're in the horror films, and you're just like, wait a minute, that doesn't look like me. I guess this couldn't happen to me. All right, cool.
Right. Right. And I don't know if it's, part of the whole fantasy side of things, that ties into it and makes that appealing to maybe more modern audiences or younger audiences. I'm not sure. But, I think some people also overlook the importance of Scream, because there was a big drought in the mid, to late 80s up until Scream came out in the mid 90s, where there were no horror films really being made, certainly not ones that were blockbusters. And while it was a parody, of horror films, and it was very self-reflective and such, it talked about, the rules of horror films and things like that. It was tongue-in-cheek. It opened the door again, and all of a sudden, you wouldn't have the remakes of, Nightmare on Elm Street and Texas Chainsaw Massacre and all the others if it wasn't for Scream kind of opening that door back up again.
Yeah, that is very true. We had run. The 80s are a great time to be a horror fan, but it was also a horrible time to be a horror fan, because by 88, 89, we saw the downward spiral of, Nightmare on Elm Street, the Friday the 13th, the Hellraisers, I've never been a fan of the sequels to Texas Chainsaw Massacre. They all suck. But we saw all these franchises basically not just running out of ideas, but going past the point of running out of ideas and just basically really destroying the characters. So much so that, like, I don't want to say it was 87, when Friday the 13th 7 came out, that was supposed to be a movie that combined Freddy versus Jason. They couldn't get the rights associated with it, whatever, so they made the main character telekinetic. Stupid movie. But it wasn't that was a good idea. It's not necessarily what fans were clamoring for at the time. It's just they ran out of ideas. It was like, hey, what if we put Freddy versus Jason? Isn't that awesome? No, not then it wouldn't have been. The one that actually happened was pretty cool. But no, not then, because you just ran out of ideas. They were so bad. You had
pumped them out was the idea, I think.
Yes, you had so many offshoots. Halloween, which actually has some pretty good sequels in there, just got old. It just got bad. So that when Scream came about, and it was almost wink, wink, check this out. We're going to, like you said, make a satire of the horror franchise, but it really is a horror film. It was just...
Yeah, it really was. It really was. Yeah, and I wonder what the connection between pumping out those horror films was with the VHS industry picking up, and if the idea was get these out because we can make just as much money selling these, on VHS as we can, screening them in the horror films, especially for rated R movies, because as you know, most rated R movies don't make money. They in the films, as they're being in the movie theaters is what I'm trying to say, and they make their money actually in the now it would be DVD and Blu-ray releases, which is why so many blockbusters shoot for the PG-13 rating, because you just have a wider range of audience that can come and see your film now. So wonder how much that played into it too. That
was the greatest thing, going to a video store back in the day, and you'd see the VHS box art, and the box art. I would go straight to the horror section, like Jason said. That was my thing. And like Phantasm, I still to this day don't understand Phantasm. I have no clue what's going on in Phantasm. I think there's about 5 of them, but man, they're amazing to watch. That's the one with the silver ball that follows you.
Yeah, right in your head.
I don't know what's going on, but man, it is amazing to watch. That's another one that kind of ran dry. It's hard to say it ran dry though, because I don't really understand the first one, so it's not. The Evil Dead series, I think Sam Raimi did a great job protecting that franchise, or maybe just nobody would make it. But Evil Dead 2, and then Army Darkness, they're all entertaining. They're interesting. But there were those movies. Straight to videos at the time. Truth or Dare was one. Trying to think of other ones. I can't think of them on the top of my head. But they go straight to video. There were some directors at the time who were shooting on VHS and then releasing it on VHS because it was such a new tech. People didn't know any better. And then at the time, I want to say, if you were a video store, you had to pay like $150, $200 to get these first released movies, because they didn't sell to the market right away. They went to video stores first to rent, and then a couple months later you'd get them in the store where you could buy them.
Right.
So it was a really good deal for filmmakers who were shooting on VHS at the time. It was pretty smart.
I remember my parents renting Top Gun and also renting a VCR from the video rental place, so that we could we could play it and record it. You know, we linked them. They linked them up so they could totally rip it from the one VCR to the other one. So we would have our own copy. You know, because you're exactly right. It wouldn't be, you know, at least 2 or 3 months before it was actually, you know, released out, you know, for you to buy. And so yeah, those days are gone now. You get them in an envelope, which is fun and convenient too. But there was something about going to those, and there was nothing like the disappointment of seeing the box, you know, the box art there, and then there's nothing behind it. It's out. They're out of them. Oh.
And depending where you were, different mom and pop shops had different styles of the way to do it. So
Yeah.
the box would be out, you take the box up to them, and then they put the box under, or it would just be like a little cardboard card with the box art, and you take that up, and then they get the movie. Or like you're talking about, there's nothing behind it, it's out. Yeah. Oh, those are the good old days. Oh, I miss those days. I enjoy Netflix because you're able to at least see the artwork and scroll through them, kind of like that. But there's something to be said about going into those stores and just walking the aisles.
Yep, those days are gone, unfortunately. Although there are some of those like family videos that are still hanging on, you know, by the skin of their teeth somehow. But anyway, well, I think that wraps it up. We really had a nice, very full show. We got news. We got like a nice little lesson in film history and horror film and Wes Craven. If you didn't know anything about Wes Craven, you sure as heck do now. So I think a good show overall.
That was one of my favorite papers I was able to combine in film school. My history major and my love of film and filmmaking was my buddy and I, Dave Brock, wrote a history of horror, specifically the slasher genre. Oh. And it was just amazing. And like you said, we went back. Psycho was pretty much the first slasher film.
Yeah. It's so cool to find out what slasher was and how controversial it was. And there's actually a movie about Hitchcock making that film because he had to bankroll it himself so that he didn't have people telling him what he couldn't do. It's the first film where actually a toilet appears on screen. Like before that was not allowed. You could not show a toilet, and nobody's even using it to, you know, to go to the restroom. She's flushing, you know, paper down it. You know, I think I don't remember if it's the money or the ledgers or something. She's flushing something down the toilet, and they're like, "You can't show a toilet. That's terrible. How can you do that?" And yet, apparently, and I haven't, you know, really looked into this, there's a very, very short sequence where there's actual nudity in it in the shower scene, but it's so brief and so quick that you can't catch it unless you actually stop frame it and find that one little frame where you can see the nudity. So he sneaks that in, and yet the censors are all worried about a toilet. You know, and in this film, and I can't remember the name of the movie, but it's got Anthony Hopkins plays Hitchcock in it. But they show the first screening of it, and you hear the scream. They don't show the movie. They show him out in the hallway listening, and you hear the screams of the audience, and literally people are fainting in the aisles when this movie comes out. I mean, that's how crazy scary that this film was, and how much a part of the soundtrack was part of it and everything else. And we just can't grasp that in today's day and age with that, because so much of it was left up to the imagination. And we're in such a culture now that it's like, I mean, look what's on TV, you know, like, you know, with The Walking Dead and stuff, it's there's so much violence, and we are so desensitized to it that we don't know what it was like for those original audiences, which is in some ways a shame, but in other ways really fascinating.
Do you by chance know who, you know, the woman who's killed in the shower scene in Psycho?
I don't know her name.
Her name is Janet Leigh. Do you know who she is?
Jamie Lee Curtis?
Yes.
That is, I think that, you know, that's one of those things that it was recessed back here somewhere, and you helped me find the file because I would not have known that from the start. But also cool, right? I mean, what a great thing to kind of point to. And yeah, Psycho is the original slasher film. So if you love, you know, Friday the 13th and Halloween and Nightmare on Elm Street and stuff, you've got to watch that film. You just owe it to yourself. Like you just have to.
Genius experiment in psychology and filmmaking. Because essentially,
Yes.
you latch on to this main character played by Janet Leigh, and you're going along, and she's torn by this mistake she made with stealing money. And we associate with her because she's really the only character on screen. She makes it to the motel. We're still with her, and she gets killed. And who's the first character we see on screen after she's killed? Norman Bates.
Bates,
He's
yeah.
pathetic because he's pathetic. He's picking up the pieces. He's trying to cover for his mom, cleaning up. The only character the audience can latch onto, this is where Hitchcock was genius. Only character, Norman Bates. Audience has to leave, I forgot her name in the movie, but has to leave Janet Leigh's character and jump onto Norman Bates. Guess what he just did? He just made the whole audience evil. And I'm not going to give away the ending, but he made us all evil, and we didn't even know it.
Yeah.
Genius.
Yeah, and just some of the classic shots in that film, and the use of black and white, and like I said, the soundtrack is just so epic that like every horror soundtrack in some way or another replicates that idea and that concept that he was able to use in that film. So definitely, it's like the holy grail of horror films. You have to have seen that if you're any kind of fan of horror films.
And that's another one that's weird because they did make a remake of that. And
it was terrible with Vince Vaughn.
Gus Van Sant. I'm like, why did you do this?
Yeah, but then they still tweaked a couple things here or there that they modernized it.
I think they made it. They tried to make it shot for shot to the shower scene, and then after that, it was on its own. And it was weird. He had a great cast like Vince Vaughn. He's not Anthony Perkins. He's too intimidating. Like Anthony Perkins, you look at him and you're like, oh yeah, he's very fragile. Vince Vaughn, like, that's a big dude, man. No way. And then Anne Heche as Marion Crane. That was the character's name. Marion Crane. Like, I think Viggo Mortensen was in it. It was just weird.
Yeah, I think he was. I think he's yeah. It really was. It's just one of those things. Like some things just need to be where they are. You don't need to remake Psycho. You don't need to remake some of these, some of these other films that are just fine where they're at. But anyway, we got sidetracked again.
My bad.
My bad. It's all right.
Yeah, in fact, you got shirt.
I noticed. That's awesome. And I'm sure a lot of our fans are very much horror fans. And we don't talk about it very often. So I think that's an okay thing to have done. So
well, the other younger nerds are really scaredy cats and doing horror films. They like cry and wet their pants. So yeah, let the adults, Jason and I, we'll talk about it.
That's right. That's right. Awesome. All right. Well, it's been an awesome show. Jim, you want to take us on our way out?
Yes, here we go. Take a deep breath. All right. Check us out on Nerdlocker. Check us out on Facebook at 2 Nerdy Dads and Nerdlocker. Check us out on Instagram, Twitter, YouTube, 2 Nerdy Dads and Nerdlocker. Great episode. Thank you, everyone. Jason, take us out.
Have a nerdy week, everybody.